And welcome to the Red Delta Project video library on suspension exercises for helping you build muscle and strength. 3 things to know about this video. First is there's timestamps down below so you can reference all of the exercises according to muscle group and tension chain so you can skip ahead or use this video for future reference in your training. Second is I'm using the NOS Twin Trainer in all of these exercises. Big fan of the NOS company, high quality trainers, very affordable prices. Link down below will direct you to the website where you can see their full range of products. And if you want program ideas and routines for how to combine all of these exercises, consider my book, Grind Style Calisthenics, which also has a link down below in the description. The suspension pistol squat is one of the most basic exercises for lower body development and training. Start off leaning a little bit against the straps with your feet directly underneath you and squat down with your knee moving forward, your hips kicking back, kind of like you're sitting onto the back of your ankle. One of the biggest mistakes that people often make is they sit too far back with this and they put too much of their weight into their hands. The more weight is on your hands, the less weight you have on your leg and therefore getting a good amount of resistance into that leg. Make sure that you're squatting down as opposed to squatting so far back. You can increase the resistance either by bringing the handles lower or moving yourself forward. This way you have less weight on your hands, more weight on your actual working leg. While doing the pistol squat, make sure that your legs are close together and your hips are square and level to the floor. This way you don't have any sort of twisting or tilting from one side to the other where your legs are coming apart, which can not only compromise the effectiveness of the exercise, but put stress on your joints. The suspension Bulgarian split squat is a leg exercise that uses both legs, but primarily weights your front leg. To set up for this, the handle is roughly about knee height. Single loop, put your foot in, try and push your heel against the handle to help lock it into place. From there, you're going to stand upright with your foot directly underneath you, not too far forward from the anchor point. This exercise is essentially a single leg squat where you squat downwards with your knee traveling forward, your hip traveling slightly backwards, and your assistance leg kicking out behind you. Again, you want to maintain most of your weight onto your front leg as you do this. You don't want to shift your weight too far back behind you. Maintain an upright posture, avoid leaning forward, and make sure that your knee is tracking over your toes with that foot very close to the center line as opposed to about a shoulder width stance. This is also one of the best suspension leg exercises to add supplemental weight for extra resistance. Dumbbells, kettlebells, holding on to anything with your hands can improve your posture, increase control and mobility in your hips while adding resistance. The suspension shrimp squat is very similar to the suspension pistol squat, where your assistance leg, instead of being in front of you, it's now behind you to add extra resistance. To set up for this, keep the strap at about knee height, or the same height that you would have for the pistol squat, and then fold your back leg up until your heel is close to your hips, holding on with the other arm. This also contributes to the resistance because it keeps your upper body in a very strict position. Moving yourself forward will take some weight off of your hand, so your leg has to work harder, and moving backwards will add assistance and therefore decrease resistance. The suspension sissy squat is essentially a body weight leg extension. You're going to turn and face away from the anchor point of your straps, holding them roughly about sternum height or a little bit lower than that, closer towards your hips. Bring your weight all onto the balls of your feet and drive your knees forward while keeping your glutes, hips, and hamstrings tight to prevent stress from going into your knees. You can progress this exercise by moving yourself forward so your hands are a little bit higher. This will cause your back to tip backwards just a little bit more, putting more of your weight behind you and therefore adding resistance to the extension of your knees. The suspension rear fly is one of the best rear deltoid and upper trap exercises you can do on suspension devices. Face towards the anchor point, preferably with the anchors towards each other or very close if you're using a dual anchor point system. Lean back at about a 20 to 30 degree angle, not too much. Slightly extend your back and your hips so you have a slight arch to your body, and you pull your hands apart, keeping your arms as straight as possible. Adding resistance is simple. You just simply step forward a few inches with your feet to place more of your weight onto your hands to add resistance. Back up your feet a few inches or away from the anchor point to decrease resistance. The bodyweight row is one of the most effective classic suspension exercises for hitting your back, biceps, and rear deltoids. Real simple setup, put the handles roughly about waist height and lean back against the straps facing towards your anchor point. From there, driving your elbows down and back close towards your sides, holding at a brief pause at the top, and then extending yourself upwards with the arms. Resistance is adjusted by moving your feet forward towards the anchor point until you're all the way down underneath. You can bend your knees to also decrease resistance, straightening your legs to add resistance. If you're really feeling adventurous, if you're all the way down at the bottom and your legs are straight, put your feet up on an elevated surface to add even more resistance and weight onto your hands. The single arm row is one of my favorite back and biceps exercises because it uses leverage, places most of your weight on one arm, so that way that arm is getting a lot of work even if you're not adding a lot of resistance to your body. The progression principles are exactly the same as the two arm row, where the greater your angle to gravity, then you have less resistance on your hands. The more you move your feet under towards the anchor point, the more resistance you have on your hand. The main difference, of course, is you're using only one arm, so you're going to want to keep it in tight and close. Also unique to the single arm row is your stance. The wider your stance is, the more stable you will feel and the easier the exercise will be. Bringing your feet closer together will decrease your stability and force your back and biceps to work harder to stabilize yourself throughout the exercise. Seated or jackknife pull-ups are the best way to transition from horizontal pulling to vertical pulling and preparing you for full body weight pull-ups. To do this, bring your handles down roughly about chest height, maybe a little bit lower than that. You're going to sit down on the floor with your hips on the ground, your arms reaching straight up overhead to the handles. Your feet are close to your hips, and then basically pull up as if you were doing a normal pull-up with your feet assisting. To progress this, extend your legs out so there's less weight on your feet, therefore there's more weight on your hands and you're working against more resistance. You can also add resistance by crossing one ankle over the other, so you're only pressing down slightly with one leg. You can even elevate your legs a little bit to bring more weight and resistance to your hands. The straight arm pull down is a fantastic way to target your triceps, rear delts, and lats. To set up for this, face towards the anchor point with the handles roughly about thigh height. Arms are straight out in front, and you pull your arms straight down while keeping your back arched and your hips fully extended. Stop at the point where you're about to lose resistance. Don't pull yourself up all the way to the point where your weight transfers to the balls of your feet. Only work with the range that you have resistance in. You can adjust the resistance by moving your feet forward towards the anchor point. Not only will that add resistance to your hands, but that will also increase your range of resistance, so that way you can pull yourself down a little bit further. And of course, decreasing resistance is going backwards, which will also give you a shorter range of resistance for your shoulders. Suspension bicep curls are one of the most satisfying bicep-focused exercises in the world. To set up, have your hands roughly at about waist height, maybe a little bit higher, about belly height on the handles. Lean back facing towards the anchor point. From there, palms up and pull your hands up towards your temple or your eyes. Resistance is adjusted once again by moving your feet closer underneath the anchor point, which will add resistance by putting more weight on your hands. Backing your feet up a little bit will put more weight onto your feet, therefore less weight onto your hands, and decrease the resistance. Pull-ups are naturally one of the best back, biceps, and muscle building exercises in the world, but suspension straps give you an extra advantage with them in several ways. The first is versatility, where you can have the handles at any width you want and at any angle of rotation you want. You can even add rotation during the exercise to help alleviate any stress on the joints while targeting certain muscles like your shoulders even better. You can also adjust the height of the handles as well. This gives you the ability to give yourself a bit of an assist with the legs if needed for either drop sets to get those last couple of repetitions, or as a good progression from the seated pull-ups to regular full body weight pull-ups. Few things match the push-up when it comes to being able to effectively work your chest, triceps, and shoulders with your body weight, and doing them on suspension straps is even better. To set up for this, lean your weight onto the hands so that your straps are roughly about shoulder width apart. Start with the straps just over your shoulders and your hands in an overhand position. From there, lower yourself down towards your hands, allowing the straps to come over your shoulders and to your sides. Pay attention to keeping your arms in tight to your side. It's okay to be touching the straps, but you shouldn't be pressing into the straps to avoid discomfort and to improve the stability in your shoulders. Resistance is adjusted by your foot placement. The more you back up, the more weight you place on your hands, so you'll have more resistance on your push chain muscles. The more you step forward, you reverse the process and decrease resistance. You can even go so far as to place your feet up on a box roughly the same height of the handles to maximize the resistance on your hands. Suspension chest flies are one of the most focused and intense chest exercises you can do with your body weight. To set up, have your anchor points on your suspension device roughly a little wider than shoulder width apart if possible. This way you have extra resistance with the inward motion as opposed to assistance with a narrower anchor point. To progress, step your feet back towards underneath the anchor point so more weight goes onto your hands. And if you need to regress and decrease resistance on your hands, simply step forward. The suspension tricep extension is supremely effective for building the size and strength of your tricep muscles. Start with the straps over your shoulders. Body is nice and straight, about shoulder width apart for your foot placement. From there, bring your hands up towards your temple by bending your elbows. You can have a little bit of shoulder flexion as your elbows come up, just a hair. It's very important to make sure that you have plenty of tension in your rear deltoids and your back as well, so that way you don't have too much stress going into your elbows. To progress your resistance, simply step backwards a little bit so more of your weight is on your hands, and to regress, step forward so you have less resistance on your hands to make the exercise easier. Dips are the squat equivalent of the upper body. Few exercises will put more resistance into your push chain muscles with as much range of motion as the dip. Doing them on suspension devices makes them supremely challenging and even a little bit safer than doing them on regular bars because you can bring them in whatever width you want and you can move the handle at the angle that's most suitable for your joints. They're also easy to regress and progress. You can move the handles closer down towards the ground so you can use your feet for a little bit of assistance, and you can bring your feet up or the handles up higher so that way you're having less assistance from your legs and more of your weight is on your arms. Suspension jackknife push-ups are a fantastic shoulder and tricep exercise. Start with placing your hands on the floor and your feet in the feet slings, picking your hips up as high as you can to get as much weight as possible on your hands. Lower your forehead down to the ground, slightly in front of your hands, trying your best to keep your elbows in towards your torso as much as possible. Push your hips back up by extending your arms and push yourself ever so slightly back into the trainer to extend your arms fully. To progress the exercise, elevate the foot slings so there is more weight on your hands. As you get higher, it may be difficult to put your feet in the slings, so I recommend placing a straight bar across that you can easily place your ankles on. The Y-Fly is a great way to target your shoulders and deltoid muscles, similar to a front raise or a lateral raise with dumbbells. It's also very good for the upper traps. Start by facing towards your anchor point with a slight lean in your body with your arms straight. Pull your handles up and outwards at the same time, sort of like you're making a Y formation with your arms. Pause as high as you possibly can, and then return yourself back down in a controlled manner. Adjust the resistance by moving your feet closer to the anchor point, which adds weight onto your hands, and backwards to regress the resistance. The suspension knee raise is one of the most challenging abdominal exercises you can do, not just because it's very hard on your abs, but also because it's very challenging for your upper body support and stability. Bring your handles roughly about waist height or a little bit higher and hold yourself up while squeezing your arms inwards. You're going to need to have full tension in your arms, shoulders, chest, and back. To progress this exercise, either work on improving your stability so that your hips don't come backwards, lifting your legs up higher, and of course straightening your legs more so that you're adding more resistance to your hip flexors and abdominal control. The foot suspended strap plank is one of the most effective plank variants there is in all of suspension workouts. If you want to decrease resistance, back yourself up a little bit so the handles are pressing yourself into the plank. If you want to add resistance, walk yourself forward so that way you're feeling like you're kind of getting stretched out. You can also increase the resistance by slightly shifting yourself back to extend the line between your hands and your feet. The hand-supported suspension plank is one of the most basic ways to work your entire anterior or flexion chain to regress the resistance, walk forward so that the handles are pulling towards your feet slightly. To progress and add resistance, walk backwards. And you can also add extra resistance by reaching your hands out forwards. The suspended body saw is a great way to take your plank training to a higher level. Start off with your feet suspended as if you were doing a foot suspended plank, and then slightly shift yourself backwards by keeping your hands where they are on the floor, moving only at your shoulder joint, keeping your whole core locked tight, including your quads and glutes. Push back as far as you're comfortable without any stress or strain in your lower back, and then return yourself back forward. The suspension stretch out is similar to doing an ab roller exercise, only with a lot more adjustment. You can do this the same way as you would normally do a plank. You can also do these on your knees if you want to decrease resistance, and you can also adjust the resistance by your body position relative to your anchor point. Moving forward will decrease the resistance, while moving yourself backwards will increase it. The suspended knee tucks are just like your foot suspended plank, only you're adding a more dynamic element to it. Start off in the same way you would with a foot suspended plank, and then drive your knees up towards your chest. The key here is to lift your hips upwards as you're doing this. If you bring your knees up towards your chest but your hips don't lift up, you're technically not really working that much against gravity. But you can also increase or decrease for body position. Backing up will place a little bit more of an assistance into the exercise, making it easier. Moving forward places more resistance against your abs and make it more difficult. You can also experiment with keeping your legs straight, as in the classic pike up, which can also increase the resistance through working with a longer lever. The foot suspended mountain climbers are a fantastic exercise for improving not only your core strength, but also your hip and core stability at the same time. Start off in the same way you would with a foot suspended plank, and this time drive one knee at a time up towards your chest, maybe slightly elevating your hips as you do so. Progression is the same as the knee tuck. Move yourself backwards to decrease resistance, move yourself forwards to increase resistance. The upper body suspended mountain climbers are also a fantastic way to not only improve your core strength and stability, but also the strength and stability of your upper body as well. To increase resistance, move yourself backwards so that you're placing a little bit more weight on your hands and you're getting stretched out. To decrease resistance, walk yourself forward so that way you're getting a little bit of an assistance into the exercise. The suspension sit-up is a unique abdominal exercise that uses your arms to both support your lower back and provide extra resistance to your core muscles when you're moving against gravity. Sit up using your abdominal muscles while pressing down into the suspension handles or foot slings. Allow your feet to naturally roll forward a few inches to prevent stress on your lower back. Keep pressing down into the straps as hard as you can, especially as you come down under control. The harder you press into the straps, the more resistance you'll have on your abdominals. The foot suspended hip hinge is a fantastic glute and hamstring exercise. Begin by placing your heels in the foot straps at about knee height. From there, keep your knees bent at about 90 degrees while keeping your shoulders packed to prevent any stress in your lower back. Drive your heels down and slightly back towards your hips as you lift up your hips, pausing at the bottom and then bringing yourself down. You can progress this exercise by placing more weight on one leg with a cross leg variant or a single leg variant. Suspension hamstring curls are one of the few hamstring exercises that works your entire hamstring complex along with your extension or posterior chain. The trick here is to lift your hips up as you pull in. Pulling in without lifting your hips will provide some benefit, but there's not nearly as much resistance because you're not really lifting that much against gravity. So lift your hips upwards as you're pulling in to maximize this exercise. You can progress it with cross leg and single leg variants, as well as placing your arms on your hips to take away some of the assistance from the upper body while adding weight to your hips. The foot suspended reverse plank is a unique exercise that challenges the strength and tension control along your entire extension chain. Depress your shoulders and keep your shoulder blades back to provide plenty of back stability, and drive both into your hands and into your heels into these straps as you lift your hips up as high as you can. You can progress this exercise with cross ankle and single leg variants, but most of the time you're probably going to get more benefit from just trying to gain more range of motion or by playing around with your body position with moving forward or backwards to adjust your resistance. The suspension bridge exercise is a great way to target all of the muscles on your extension chain, but especially your spinal erectors, while improving spinal mobility. Drive your heels straight down into the floor while almost pulling backwards to engage all of your hamstring muscles, especially those that are extending your hips upwards. Pull your shoulders down and towards your heels using the muscles in your spine. You also want to make sure that your traps and your lats are engaged to keep your shoulders from hunching forward and to prevent lower back strain. The hand suspended side plank is one of the most challenging yet adjustable exercises for your lateral chain in all of the suspension exercise library. Have your feet staggered apart and then lift yourself up by extending both legs. You can progress this exercise by reaching out further and regress it by pulling backwards. The foot suspended side plank involves placing your bottom foot into one of the foot slings and your other foot on top. You may need to bend your top knee just a little bit to place it onto the ankle of the bottom leg. Make sure your body's in a straight alignment so you're fully on your side when you're doing this and not rolling forward. You can make this a little bit more difficult by stretching yourself out and decrease the resistance by pulling yourself more over your supporting arm. Then make sure, of course, you can do it on both sides for the same amount of time. The dynamic foot suspended side plank is just like the regular side plank, only you lift and lower your hips closer to the floor and then back up using all of the muscles along your lateral chain. This is especially effective for your obliques, keeping your lats tight in order to stabilize, and your lateral hip on your bottom leg. You can progress this with, once again, stretching yourself out a little bit with extending your arm out. You can also progress it by bending your top leg so it's not supporting as much. The suspended single arm sit-up is a great way to put a little bit more emphasis into your obliques. Do this like the usual suspended sit-up, only using only one arm and one suspension handle. That way you can lift primarily with the obliques and abs on that side. You can even twist and cross over to the opposing foot to give yourself that extra little bit of twist at the end. Keep pressure on the hands as you come down into the bottom position. Whew, okay, long video. I know there's a lot of questions and stuff, always thoughts and questions down below. And remember, these exercises are the basics that'll get you most of the way to where you want to go, but there's tons of variants out there. We're barely scratching the surface with these exercises. So if you want to question me about any variants or any modifications, down below in the comment section, I always read all the comments. And as always, if you want to learn more about programming these exercises, grind style calisthenics, and the trainer that I was using, of course, NOSC, high quality trainers at affordable prices. So thanks again so much for watching. Be fit, live free.